Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a weekly political analysis show. The government shutdown began last weekend has ended. Once again, it was a tight vote showing the narrow majority that Republicans have in the House of Representatives is still functional for the time being. As a reminder, the current state of play is 214 to 218. There are 3 vacancies, which means the Speaker can only afford to lose 1 vote and still pass legislation, because if there's a tie, then the bill is defeated. In reality, some members can abstain from voting, so he could have up to 3 abstentions and still pass bills. The numbers will change in the next few months as a Democrat and a Republican are elected each, bringing the total back to 215 to 219. The bill, as I talked about last week, was a compromise bill. It passed 217 to 214. It fully funded government operations until September 30th, where we will inevitably have this happen all over again, and in the shadow of the midterm elections. The lone exception is the Department of Homeland Security, which was funded for 10 days until the 13th of February, and I will not be surprised if there is another government shutdown, and indeed, that is what congressional leaders are expecting. For Democrats, they wouldn't really mind if DHS shut down, and for Republicans, they've already funded ICE for several years in advance until 2029, I believe. So neither party really has anything to gain by conceding here. There will be another government shutdown that is pretty much certain. You can hear the wind outside. I always doubted that this highly contentious issue would be resolved inside of 10 days, and indeed that it seems to be happening. Looking more long-term, I do expect Democrats to get pretty much all of their demands met. If not all of them, most of them. They're looking for body cameras on ICE, which DHS has already conceded on, requiring ICE agents to provide IDs, removing their face masks, ending roving patrols, and they want to require judicial warrants for arrests, as well as ending racial profiling and questioning or searching people based on an individual's location. And Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have been saying it's about basic people's rights, it's about their people's safety. If Republicans do not like the ideas, they need to explain why, which I think is a fair point. The problem is that leftist militant groups in places like Minneapolis, what they've been doing is they've been terrorizing ICE agents outside of the hotels where they've been sleeping. So if anything, ICE should not be showing their IDs, further making themselves more vulnerable. So I think that is a bad idea, and I think Republicans will oppose that. I think body cameras are a good idea. Kristi Noem, as I said, has already agreed to that. Some officers have been wearing them, but it's been very piecemeal. Here and here, not here. It's been very back and forth. As for judicial warrants, it's an idea that sounds good in theory. However, probable cause is still needed and is used in some instances. So to get rid of that would really undermine ICE's ability to arrest somebody. If that was the case, then an illegal immigrant could go up to an ICE agent and say, I'm an illegal immigrant, and ICE would not be able to arrest them until they got a warrant. And by the time they got a warrant, that person could be long gone. Someone's location and what language they speak can really be a good tell as to whether they're an illegal immigrant or not. For example, if you're in an area where there are basically no Spanish speakers and you encounter somebody who can't speak English, period, that's highly suspicious and they are probably an illegal immigrant. And not just Spanish, it could really be any language. An ICE officer in that situation would be justified in questioning them. Maybe not arresting them, but questioning them. However, racial profiling, of course, if it is happening, I believe it might be a red herring, but I believe if that's the case. But if it is happening, that is, of course, absolutely unacceptable. Once again, though, as I've said before, if you are upset with the law, please take that up to the people who make the law, not to the people who enforce it, which would be the legislative branch. They're the ones that make the laws. John Thune, who is the Republican leader in the Senate, he took over after Mitch McConnell. He has said that Democrats' ideas are completely unworkable, and indeed a shutdown is likely. However, DHS is not just immigration enforcement. It seems like that's all they do, and that's something that the Trump administration has really leaned into. But for example, FEMA is a part of DHS. That was done after 2001, after September 11th. So if there is a natural disaster and FEMA is not open, that could be a big problem. We're in the middle of winter. If there's a snowstorm and DHS is shut down, they're not going to be able to operate as they normally would. They'll still be open because they're essential, but they're going to be trying to operate and save lives with one hand tied behind their back. All right. Otherwise, I see no motivation for either side to compromise, as I said earlier, so I believe we are headed for a mini government shutdown next week. So let's move on to what was probably the most interesting part of the week, and that was the Epstein files. There's been a lot of stuff, and I don't really have the knowledge, the expertise, or the information to talk about what was in them in full. You can probably find that online. However, I do know that a lot of powerful people have been implicated. For example, the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, he told us, I think it was back in October or November, that he only ever saw Epstein once, and that was in 2005. However, they were caught in the Epstein files emailing back and forth in 2012, 7 years later, about taking a trip to Epstein's creepy island in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, Elon Musk was invited to the island and declined, and then it seems like he showed interest in going to the island in 2012 and 2013. Doesn't mean he actually went, but it is definitely strange. I kind of got the sense that Elon wouldn't really find himself in that kind of field. Like, I really don't see him abusing children or anybody, really. I mean, at least not in a sexual way. So I don't think Elon really did anything wrong here. Of course, that could come out later. We don't know. But that's kind of the vibe I get here. Then we have Prince Andrew, former Prince Andrew, where he was kneeling on all fours in an image with someone lying on the ground. Very creepy. And then there seems to be more documents on the way. 3 million documents were released. There might be more, although the DOJ says there's a lot of duplicate stuff still waiting in the wings. Meanwhile, Trump said the DOJ, for his part, he's done. He's moved on. As soon as he got inaugurated, he moved on. He suggested DOJ should just move on. He said, quote, "It's like this is all they're supposed to be doing," he told reporters in the Oval Office. And frankly, the DOJ, I think, should just say we have other things to do. End quote. Very strange. Also, this has hit more international news as opposed to domestic news, and that's over in the UK. A former government minister and ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson, has been the first politician or ex-politician, depending on what you want to call him, to really fall to Epstein. Mandelson was accused of passing on market-sensitive data during the 2008 financial crash, the thing that put millions of people out of work, both here and around the world. He sent this stuff to Epstein via email. I think one of the things was the UK government at the time was considering how to save the euro during the Greek debt crisis, and he told Epstein that they were going to announce a bailout the day before, which would have allowed him to manipulate markets, and then the euro spiked, which he could have bought a bunch of euros, and then the value would have gone through the roof. So definitely very illegal. And I expect him to get arrested. Investigation is ongoing. He's definitely can be charged with a crime. There's no way, unless there's like a statute of limitations thing, because this was 16 years ago. But except for that, I don't see how he could get away with it. He's a very creepy guy, by the way, Peter Mandelson. Feel free to look him up if that's something you're interested. Since this isn't a British-based show, we're not going to focus on all the things that he did do. But I think it is important to say that he is the first politician, at least as far as I know, anywhere on Earth, that has their career ended because of Epstein. And I say this somewhat loosely because his peak was really in the 90s and the noughties during the Blair government. As I said, he was an ambassador to the U.S. for about 6 months last year, so that's kind of his really only recent angle. But he has been a senior advisor to the UK Labour Party. I think what is crazy is that I'm starting to think the conspiracy theories might be partially correct. And I think I said this at some point last year. It must have been in like September or something. Maybe it was in July or August, where I said I was kind of thinking that all of this Epstein stuff, not all of it, but most of it was trumped up. No pun intended. But and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, to be clear, but if I see evidence that will change my mind, I'll change my opinion accordingly. For most of last year, since the summer, really, I thought this Epstein thing was a joke. As I said, to be clear, I didn't think Epstein did nothing wrong. He obviously was convicted. He hurt a whole lot of people. But what I thought was always hard to believe was that there's an idea of a cabal of world leaders who are all implicated in his crimes in some way. However, I'm starting to question that. Is this going to be a trend, or is this a one-off? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. we're going to talk about Videogate, or at least that's what I'm calling it, Videogate. This was in last week's news. Trump posted a racist video depicting the Obamas as monkeys or apes or chimpanzees, whatever. I'm not, who cares exactly what it is? It was obviously wrong. If you haven't heard about it, then I'm sorry to be the one to tell you. The president partially admitted he didn't watch the video before posting it, but he also seemed to say that he handed the video off to somebody else. And I think the narrative has really not at all been surprising. First, the White House defended the move. This was all in like a matter of a day and a half. Whatever day it happened, I think it was on Thursday. In the morning, Caroline Leavitt defended it. Then they were telling people, oh, you're overreacting, move on. Then the outrage grew in the morning and the afternoon. Then they said a staffer posted it by mistake. Then they said, oh, well, Trump saw it. He didn't see the whole video, and it was at the end. But it wasn't a mistake to post it. And then they took it down. So that's kind of the whole... Well, actually, they took it down before then they admitted it after the fact. So it was kind of... The way the narrative changed is really, really hilarious. And I will say, this is very like 2019 era. This reminds me a lot of the whole... if you were following politics back then, in, I believe it was like June or July of 2019, Trump posted that 4 Democratic congresswomen should go back to where they came from. Like, it was a mini scandal. It was kind of funny. At least I thought it was funny. And it definitely feels kind of ridiculous in terms of not really the reaction, but like how it happened. That's kind of my take here. I always usually rely on something called Hanlon's razor. We all heard of Occam's razor. Hanlon's razor is, if you have to attribute someone's action to either malice or stupidity, you pick stupidity. Really nothing else for me to say here. And then this is the last thing, I promise. This one's going to be short. This is about TrumpRX. I talked about this about 2 months ago. TrumpRX is something the White House is running, and I'll put a few pictures on screen if you're listening on YouTube. If not, I'll kind of describe what we see. So what is TrumpRX? TrumpRX doesn't distribute medications. Don't worry, the White House has not become a pharmacy. It would look bad if after cocaine was found in the White House during the Biden administration to have prescription drugs running through the White House. But there is not really a whole lot on this website. And to be fair, it did just start a few days ago. They have some weight loss drugs, they have some infertility drugs, and they have a few other things. The administration is claiming they're saving Americans 93%. If you don't have insurance, not sure if that's true or not. I'm sure the site will help people in some way. I don't really see that changing anything politically. Like, I don't see people being like, oh, Trump saved me money on my medication, so I'm going to go vote for Republicans. Like, I don't really see that. If you look on the landing page, there is a search function. There's very little here, as I said. I tried to look up Adderall for ADHD. I figured that's pretty common medication. Nothing came up. There's none of that. Below, if you go below that, it says America was being overcharged for medicine. The same drugs made in the same factories at the same dosages are costing Americans up to 1,000% more than any other country. That is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. The White House has a point here. Americans have long paid more for prescription drugs. They paid more for every kind of healthcare treatment under the sun. It's really cheaper, if you think about it, to fly to Europe, get a treatment there, and then come back. Usually that's how it is. The White House, as I said, has a point here. America does pay more for than other countries, especially we're essentially subsidizing their lower prices. And then it shows the cost of Gonal F450 IU per pen, which is a fertility treatment. The cost is $1,449 in the US and $355 in Canada. Then it shows with TrumpRX, it goes down to $233 a month. I still think that's pretty high, but whatever. Once again, this is not a government subsidy or anything. It's basically just a list of prices. It's kind of like, if you're familiar with Gas Buddy. Gas Buddy is an app where you can find the cheapest gas price. You don't buy gas from Gas Buddy. It just shows you where the prices are. That's basically what this is. It's kind of like a catalog. So it doesn't cost taxpayers anything other than to run the website. And I really thought this already existed. Maybe I'm wrong. More medical transparency is a good thing. It's something we need. We need it more than just prescription drugs, but that's a great place to start. So many people are on prescription drugs, so that's great. So how does this site work? before we wrap up here? Well, you don't buy through the website, as I said. In the FAQ section, it says that you use the coupon offered through the website and you go to a local pharmacy. Now, I don't have any prescriptions, and I definitely don't need weight loss or fertility drugs. So I'm not going to be trying this anytime soon. But if someone would let me know, I'd be more than happy to report what happened on the report here and tell everybody. Here's one from Wegovy. If you notice, the group number is MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, MAHA. So we'll see. There's about 4 dozen medications on here. They are FDA approved, mostly generic drugs. So if anyone has an experience with the MAHA coupon, please let me know, and I'll be more than happy to report what it is. All right, so that is it for now. Thanks you for sticking with me on this slightly shorter episode. Please let me know your thoughts, as always, in the comments below, and I will see you next week. Hopefully you all stay warm. That's what I'm trying to do. Bye-bye.